My family said to me, "So now he just lies there while we have to feed him?" I heard my wife whisper, "Let him rot. He's only been dragging us down." Those were the words that made me see my family's true nature, and they became the reason I decided to rebuild my life from the ground up. That February morning, it wasn't raining, but the cold in Rochester, New York, sank deep into the bones. I had lived in that house for nearly 30 years. Every week, I still pulled the garbage bin to the curb myself, like clockwork. I was 63, not young, but still confident. I never asked anyone to help with small things like that. I believed I could handle it. I always believed that. And then I slipped. I didn't see the black ice beneath my feet. Or maybe I did, but thought I could manage it. It only took a split second. My legs flew out from under me. My back slammed hard against the concrete. I heard the crack, an unmistakable sound of bone breaking. The pain sliced through me, sharp, searing, like my whole body had been split in two. I couldn't move. I couldn't call for help. I just lay there, on the frozen pavement, next to the trash bin in silence. The sky was growing brighter, but I felt darkness creep into me. A terrifying thought whispered inside. Is this how I die? Next to garbage, with no one even realizing I exist? My wife, Celeste, never came to check on me. She had a Zoom book club meeting. My son, Malcolm, was still sleeping in upstairs. I lay there for almost 40 minutes, motionless, until Jeff, the mailman, noticed something was wrong. He was the only one who cared. He heard the neighbor's dog barking relentlessly and realized he hadn't seen me at the window like usual. He saved me. He called 911, and I was rushed to the hospital. I underwent emergency surgery. My hip was broken in 3 places. I had a reaction to the anesthesia, something that temporarily affected my nervous system. I couldn't speak, couldn't open my eyes, but I could hear everything. And then came that fateful night. I was lying in recovery, eyes closed, ears wide open. I heard my son's voice just beyond the curtain. So what now? He just lays there while we feed him? And my wife, the woman I once believed was my partner, my peace whispered back, but with cutting clarity, let him rot. He's been dragging us down for years. I couldn't cry. I couldn't scream. But my heart broke in that moment. I had given everything to hold our family together, sacrificed pieces of myself to keep us whole. And now, when I was at my weakest, in the most pain, I was nothing more than dead weight to them. From that moment on, I knew I didn't have a home anymore, only a house that held my body and the people who used to be my family. I was brought home a week after the surgery. The nurse who wheeled me out to the car leaned in gently and said, "Keep your spirits up. You're going to need a lot of strength." But what she didn't know was, strength wasn't what I lacked the most. What I needed, what I craved, was a shoulder to lean on. And heartbreakingly, even in my own home, I didn't have that. I couldn't walk. I needed a wheelchair, adult diapers, and assistance with everything, from eating to basic hygiene. The hospital had provided a list of rehabilitation centers, but Celeste refused. She said, "I can take care of him. We haven't even paid off the house." It sounded like concern, but really, it was her way of saying she wasn't going to spend a dime on keeping me alive. In the early days, Celeste pretended to be patient. Barely. She brought food, fed me a few spoonfuls, but her eyes were always glued to her phone. A few days later, the food was left on the table, cold, untouched, and with no reminders. Then came the frozen meals, still sealed, just tossed onto the counter like leftovers no one wanted. I used to think the worst thing was being bedridden, but it's not. Worse is being ignored, living as if you've already died. There were mornings I sat in my wheelchair for hours, soaked, ashamed, because no one bothered to take me to the bathroom. When I asked, Celeste simply replied, I'm not a nurse. I have my own life to live. Malcolm, my son, visited once a week, just enough to say he did. He showed up with a bitter face and a frozen tone. The one time I asked him to go upstairs and grab my iPad so I could read the news, he threw it on the couch and snapped, I'm not your damn errand boy. That's when I started taking notes. Not with my hands, I was too weak, but in my mind. I recorded every word they spoke, every glance that passed through me, every time they walked by without even acknowledging I was there. I didn't want pity. I just wanted to feel like family. One night, Celeste was on the phone in the kitchen, unaware I was nearby. I heard her say, he's sucking the life out of me. God, I wish I hadn't signed as his next of kin at the hospital. I clenched my teeth, not out of anger, but pain. A pain that cut deeper than bone. But what they didn't know was I wasn't as helpless as they thought. I had a separate bank account, nearly $280,000 in savings from an old credit union fund I opened before marrying Celeste. I had my pension, my insurance, and now I had something more important than all of that, the realization that I couldn't trust anyone but myself. Quietly, I reached out to an old friend from church and asked for a referral to a private caregiver. That's how Loretta came into my life. A former nurse, patient, understanding, and most importantly, never judgmental. I paid her in cash. She came when Celeste was out, helped me bathe, change clothes, and taught me how to stand again, step by step. There were moments I trembled, moments I cried, but Loretta always whispered, we're going one step at a time. One day you'll walk out of this house on your own. I believe it. And for the first time in months, I wanted to believe too. Because I knew one thing for sure. I can't die here. Not in a house that no longer feels like home. Not surrounded by people who call me a burden. I have to live. And I have to live like a man again. Each day that passed in that cold, silent house made one thing painfully clear. I was allowed to exist, but not to live. But Loretta was different. She didn't ask too many questions. She didn't rush me. She simply cleaned me gently, helped me sit up, taught me how to grip the walker, and smiled softly every time I took another step. And each step, for me, felt like a heartbeat returning. I started planning, quietly, without telling a soul, without raising suspicion. I made a discreet call to Donald Kilmer, a longtime friend and the lawyer who had helped me draft my will back when I was still working. His voice was still deep, still careful, just like I remembered. Are you sure? I replied simply, I don't have another choice. I asked him to rewrite the will, completely. This time there would be no Celeste, no Malcolm, not a cent to anyone in that house I once called a home. Everything would go to Willa. Willa is my granddaughter, she's only 15. But she's the only one who still looks at me like a human being, not a shadow. She visits me every weekend, sometimes after school. She never asks for anything, never complains. She just sits next to me and talks about class, little things from her day. One time she picked up a brush and combed my hair, whispering, I like being here with you. You always listen. That alone was enough to remind me I still had value. Not because I could fix a leaky faucet or hand over money each month, but because I still had a heart that could love and ears that could listen. I opened a trust account. certified by a lawyer, with financial advisement included. The money would be distributed in stages. Willa wouldn't gain full control until she turned 25. And now I was preparing for the final step, to leave. One morning, Celeste brought in breakfast like usual: stale toast, cold coffee. I pushed the tray away, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "I'm leaving today." She laughed mockingly. "You can't even walk. Don't kid yourself." And I stood up. Not quickly, not steadily, but I stood, thanks to months of practice with Loretta. Right then, Loretta pulled up in the driveway. Malcolm had just walked in. His eyes widened. "Are you crazy, Dad? You'll die out there?" I stared right back. "Better out there than dying in here." I didn't take much, just a few changes of clothes, some books, old photo albums. They didn't help me pack, they just stood there watching, like they'd just lost a prized possession. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in a senior living community near Genesee Valley Park. It's not fancy, but it's clean, quiet, and mine. It felt like an old animal pulling its paw from a trap, bleeding but free at last. Willow was the first to know I'd moved. She didn't ask why. She just said, "I'm happy for you." And then she held my hand, tightly. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't alone. I hadn't ended anything. I was just beginning to live again, on my own terms. I thought that when I left, quietly, without a word of resentment, that would be the end of it. I had my own space. Willa still stopped by every week. Loretta helped me take care of myself. The small apartment at the assisted living facility wasn't anything luxurious, but it was clean, peaceful, and, most importantly, no one there called me a burden. But then the phone started ringing. First, it was Celeste. Her voice trembled, breaking into sobs. "You just walked out like that. I don't know how to face the neighbors. I miss you. I was wrong." I listened, but I didn't answer. Then came Malcolm. His messages shifted from fake concern to careful probing. "Dad, do you still have the old will? I just want to know if there's any way we could work things out." I understood. They were beginning to realize that what they lost wasn't just a father or a husband, but an asset. Then came a letter from their lawyer, a formal request for mediation signed by both Malcolm and Celeste. They wanted to discuss a more equitable division of assets. It read like they were the abandoned victims. I wasn't angry. I found it amusing, honestly. Still, I took the letter to Donald Kilmer, my lawyer, my old friend, and the one person who'd witnessed the years I spent being treated like a piece of furniture in the very house I built. He read it over, sipped his black coffee, then said, "They think you're bluffing. Maybe it's time they see you've really stood up." 2 weeks later, I sat in a neutral conference room at a law office in downtown Rochester. Across from me sat Celeste, in all black, face powdered pale, as if attending a funeral. Beside her, Malcolm, visibly tense, shaking his head repeatedly. I wore an old suit, still a good fit. Held my cane, but my head was up, shoulders straight. My lawyer spoke firmly. "My client is of sound mind. Every amendment to his will is legally binding, witnessed, and documented. The estate has been transferred to a trust. The sole beneficiary is his granddaughter, Willa." Celeste began to cry. Malcolm clenched his fists, then burst out, "You're using money to get revenge." I didn't reply right away. I just looked him straight in the eye. "No, I'm using my will to protect the values I've lived by, ones neither of you ever respected." Celeste's voice wavered. "You can't do this to the mother of your child." I answered calmly, The woman I married died a long time ago. You're just the shadow that stayed behind to take advantage of me." The room fell silent. No one said another word. We left that mediation room without a handshake, without a hug, without a single tear that felt honest. After that mediation session, I didn't feel angry anymore. The urge to win, to put them in their place, to make them understand, it was gone. All I felt was tired. Tired of living by someone else's rules for far too long, working like a machine, giving unconditionally, yet never truly being seen, not as a human, not as a father, not as a husband, not as an aging man longing for love, instead of being discarded like something old and broken. The days that followed were peaceful. I joined a cooking class at the community center, learned how to make lentil soup and cherry pie. I walked each morning with a group of silver-haired seniors in the park, people who no longer rushed, but still knew how to tell stories and listen. Loretta still visited, sometimes just to sit with me on the balcony, sipping coffee in silence, but that silence was enough. It reminded me I wasn't alone. And Willa, she still brought that giant cookie every time she came over. She didn't ask about the lawsuit, didn't bring up money, didn't mention inheritance. She only asked, "Are you feeling better?" I nodded, smiled, and knew I had chosen the right person. One day, I handed her a cream-colored envelope with a simple note on the front. "Willa, open this when you get home." Inside wasn't a legal document. It wasn't about finances. It was just a letter. Handwritten, something I had worked on for many long nights. I told her the story of my life. Not through achievements, but through emotions. I wrote about who I used to be, how invisible I felt when my own family turned their backs on me. And I wrote this: "You don't have to be the best. Just be the one who cares when no one else does. You've already done something your mother and grandfather never could. You sat with someone in pain, and you didn't walk away." I told her to use the money to study, to live, to build a world where kindness isn't a transaction. And at the very end, I wrote, "When people treat you like you don't matter, don't waste time proving them wrong. Stand up and walk away, just like I did." 3 days later, I received a dinner invitation from Malcolm. Subject line in bold capital letters: "Family is forever." I didn't respond. I just laughed. A quiet laugh, but one that came from the deepest place of peace. I didn't need another meal disguised as reconciliation, just to be treated like a burden clinging to life. Instead, I chose a small seat by the window, where the last light of day spilled over a warm cup of tea. In my hands was the draft of my next letter. This one wasn't for Willa. It was for me. A reminder: I was once considered a burden, but now I'm simply a man. Free to live, free to choose, and finally, free to be heard. If you're still listening at this point, then maybe, just maybe, somewhere in this story, you saw a part of yourself, once overlooked, once forgotten, once silently enduring inside a house that no longer felt like home. But you know what? A person's worth isn't measured by how much they can do. It's found in how they're heard, how they're respected, even when they can no longer give anything back. You don't need anyone's permission to live a life of dignity. You owe nothing to those who once called you a burden. And if you're still enduring in silence, please remember this: silence is not forgiveness. Enduring is not love. And walking away is not giving up. It's the very first step back to yourself. This is where our story ends. If you felt moved, please leave us a comment, like, share, and subscribe to support us in creating more stories like this. Thank you for listening. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.